think the main thing is that you can't believe that potentially you're the first person to find this, because it's an artist like Turner who is a household name, is really well established. There are so many publications, there's so many books, there's so much scholarship about Turner. And then to find something that maybe, has no one looked at this before? Has no one gone into this level of detail to find these kind of finer, very personal, intimate details? It just feels like a win, like it's a little celebration that you've been able to find something and potentially then add something new to such an established canon.
The Turner Bequest was everything left in Turner's studio when he died in 1851. We know that he intended to leave paintings to the nation, but what he probably didn't anticipate was everything that had been left there, including lots of unfinished and preparatory material and all his sketchbooks, which were very private to him. But in 1856, an Act of Parliament decreed that everything should come to the nation with no distinction between unfinished and finished. And this is the extraordinary body of work, which is the Turner Bequest, this incredible visual archive of an entire working life.
I've personally spent over 20 years working on the cataloguing project, and it's incredible that it's finally coming to completion. Projects have been going on for decades, if not centuries in spirit, since the 1850s really. He did say, what is the use of them but together? And so, this is the most complete collection of Turner in the world. And soon over 37,000 of Turner's works on paper will be available to everyone online.
Because Turner was an artist who was always on the move, sketchbooks would have been his most useful pieces of equipment.
He was meticulous. He took a sketchbook everywhere he went with him. He kind of always had one sort of in his back pocket. I love the idea that any sort of thought that comes into his head, because while there are sort of sketches and buildings that he's seen, there's also bits of notes that he was writing. There's almost like laundry lists. My favourite is when he's going to countries where he didn't speak the language. He has German phrases so that he could get around because he was travelling by himself.
He's recording everything he sees. Sometimes he's on foot, sometimes he's in a carriage and you can see the pencil responding to the bumps in the road. Sometimes he might even be on a boat, and that's the beauty of sketching. It's an activity that suits a person who is always on the move.
Some of the trick of Turner is to get one's eye in and become accustomed to his visual notation. The friends he occasionally went on tour with or on shorter visits would recall that to see him working, often away from the group, was to see him almost writing very tight little jagged motions and marks in these handheld sketchbooks in the palm of his hand.
We learn from Turner that there's not very much judgment in his perspective. He's really an observer of all types of society. You don't get that he's classist or anything like that. It's more that he wants to observe and record everything that he sees, and that's what he's interested in.
Turner had a fantastic visual memory, so some things become sort of ciphers in the drawings. And often these are the kinds of things we're working to identify. If you look at these things hard enough, eventually most of them will reveal themselves.
That's how Turner is understood, is in terms of his tours, his movements. One of the things that I like to do then in terms of understanding that itinerary is to literally map it out on a map a hard copy map. Other people use Google Maps, but I find it much more accessible to see in hard copy the places in front of me that I can physically annotate with a pen. It's about sort of connecting with Turner and feeling almost like you could, that's how I would travel. I would take a physical map with me now, and it's the same map, and I can chart his movements so I could follow his footsteps, essentially.
I think Turner's sketchbooks would have been such a sort of precious hoard. He could store up visual material for months and months of work at a time, and then once he had them back in the studio, he was able to draw upon this rich visual archive. He didn't necessarily need something in front of him to draw it, but it was a jog to his memory, and he could also pull out tiny little bits and weave them into a composition. So it was absolutely fundamental to his entire way of working, and you sense that he also, it was part of the way that he processed ideas about landscape.
One thing we discovered recently, when you look at two sketchbooks side by side that traditionally have been thought to belong to a tour from 1828, the style in which the drawings have been executed is actually quite different. So even though these sketchbooks were thought to have been used side by side, you can see if you study them carefully that they can't have been, because the way the drawings have been executed is quite different, and that suggests a different method of travel, or certainly a different speed of travel. So one gives you very kind of slow moving, getting a sketch from every angle. The other is much more rapid, they're hurried sketches, it's all in one page. And the crucial thing to explain that, which we learned with our research, is that there was a faster ferry service introduced on that river within that time frame. And that was one of the things that led us to understand that actually there was an 1828 tour, but there was also an 1838 tour through the same region.
As a watercolour painter with my own practice, I really have enjoyed learning Turner's individual processes of how he paints, especially using watercolour paints. It's really innovative, and I feel like it has given myself insight into my own practice, seeing how he washes out paints, how he layers paints, how he removes pigment as well, especially when he's doing his skies and his seas. I've worked on a few pieces where at first glance you can't really tell what you're looking at, and then once you spend more time in it, you get quite intimate with the piece and you start to pick out that, oh, there's a boat in the distance, or you can see different parts of a cityscape. That really forces you to look deeply at a composition.
I would have said that my favourite aspect of his work was landscape. That's how I came to know Turner, was as a kind of student of art history, interested in British landscape. But I think one of the most appealing aspects has been discovering things that, like the kind of scenes of everyday life and things like that. The landscapes obviously are amazing, but you sort of expect to find those. So I think it's the unexpected. Turner's not really known as a figure painter, but some of the ability to kind of capture an expression, a pose with a few dashes of pencil is really captivating, particularly in some of the small sketches. Sometimes it is the more sort of incidental sketches that draw you in, particularly I think in the later works. A lot of his work is scribbly, for want of a better word. It is very sketchy, it's very loose. But when you kind of go, oh, I think that's a fisherman. Oh yeah, she's carrying a basket, and it just all kind of, again, it's that kind of coming into day-to-day life and it being quite animated.
You really see how his style has evolved over his career, and he's, towards the last, I say like 30 or so years of his life, he's really just focusing on the emotion that he's getting, and you really get the sense of the picturesque, and why he's such a great picturesque painter is he's really good at getting that emotion onto the paper for the viewer to see.
Now we've got this rich depth of knowledge about him. We'll be able to draw on that for years and decades to come in order to more accessibly and fully tell the story of who Turner was and why we consider him to be the greatest British landscape painter.